Before being interrogated by the police, I always believed my wife was the most wonderful person in my life. The cops interviewing me led to my learning about my wife's adultery. After a lengthy legal struggle, I discovered a troubling fact about my wife. I was ordered by police to come down to their station, and as soon as I arrived, I was quizzed for hours about one of my wife's co-workers. I did not know him, however, and eventually persuaded the authorities of this. That's when they showed me footage of my wife having her back blown out by him. I watched it in shock, and as a result of what I had seen, I began to panic. The cops had a paramedic examine me, and he claimed my blood pressure was extraordinarily high. He asked me to go to the hospital, but I declined. When I claimed I needed to find my wife and son, when I calmed down, I sought an explanation from the authorities as to why I was here and why they were informing me of my wife's infidelity. Officers indicated that the man on the video was having an affair with my wife and numerous other women at the same time. Someone had found him in his driveway that morning, severely beaten and bound. He was alive but in severe condition, and they weren't sure if he'd make it. His wife gave the officers permission to search his phone and computer, which is when they discovered the footage of my wife. They inquired where I was that morning, and I told them I was at the gym, then went to work around 10 minutes away. At that moment, they told me I could leave, but I shouldn't stay at my house since they didn't know if his affair with my wife was the reason he was attacked. They also claimed that my wife wasn't the only person he was having an affair with. That's when I rushed home. My son was staying with our neighbors, so I took him home and packed some clothing and his laptop for school. I grabbed my handgun and we drove 45 minutes to my folks' place. I phoned the cop who gave me his card, and he informed me that my wife is in the hospital with the guy she's been cheating on. I spent the next few minutes drinking as everyone else slept and softly sobbed. My wife was the person I gave everything to. Words cannot express how much I adored her. She was the most wonderful woman I could have ever asked for, and I did everything I could to be her ideal life partner. Anyway, with little sleep in the morning, I conducted my own research and discovered that the cop with whom I spoke about my wife's location was lying through his teeth. It turned out that my wife was not at the hospital with her lover. I learned this when I contacted our family detective. She had been admitted to the hospital's psychiatric unit much earlier in the day, while he was still in surgery. I'm not sure why they would lie about this, but they did. Needless to say, this event has made me extremely wary of law enforcement. Anyway, when I woke up that afternoon, I contacted my uncle's law partner, a family acquaintance. He genuinely came to my parents' house and sat down with me to discuss my alternatives. His entire law company is now representing me in both the divorce and criminal proceeding. That day, he obtained an emergency custody order and a protective order against my wife for myself, my son, and my parents. Our court date was set in 60 days. The cop served her the following day as she was leaving the psychiatric facility. She is currently staying with her parents. I hadn't spoken to her yet, and she hadn't reached out to me either. That wounded me more than I expected. That she cared so little about me or what we had that she didn't even bother calling. Not even an apology, a mention of what she did, a word of goodbye, or a plea that it was a silly mistake. It was almost as if she didn't care. I needed to tell my son something, so I chose to tell him the truth. The first words he spoke were, "Please don't let mommy take me away." I questioned him why he would say that, and his response crushed my heart. According to what he told me, my wife has been mistreating him when I'm not present, and if he tells me, she would take him away and my son will never see me again. She had been emotionally manipulating our son, and I was too naive to notice it. To be honest, that devastated me even more than the video. I told the lawyer what my kid had said, and he used his statement, as well as her mental state and commitment, to obtain immediate custody. I contacted his school about treatment resources, and he will begin therapy after the first of the year. At this point, I feel like the worst father that has ever lived. Her parents contacted me and asked to come meet us. I was still with my parents at the time, and I told them they could come, but she was not permitted to be near us. They agreed. They were quite sorry, and her poor mother cried the entire time she was with us. Her father was distraught and repeatedly referred to my wife as that girl. They both stated that they had a feeling something was wrong with her and that they had not raised her in this way. We hugged and sobbed before they went, and I promised them they'd always be a part of our life, no matter what happened with the divorce. According to what my kid informed me, their visit was the most difficult part of our entire process. My lawyers did excellent work. They discovered that the man my wife was sleeping with had a long criminal history. One of the lawyers told me that when they attempted to print the guy's arrest record, the printer ran for 5 minutes straight. According to what they learned, he is now on parole for substance offenses and has previously been affiliated with gangs. A firm's investigator contacted the co-worker who drove my wife to the hospital. The co-worker informed them that my wife's adultery was a well-known secret in the office. My lawyers believe that is how the cops determined who I was and who my wife was on the video. There are several photos from last year's Christmas party at her workplace, and my wife and I appear in several of them. So it took some time, but my son recently began therapy, and the improvement is immediately evident. I asked him if he was okay with me talking to his therapist, and he said sure. So I've had a couple conversations with her about it. According to the therapist, my soon-to-be ex-wife emotionally blackmailed him anytime they were alone together. He was not permitted to make any noise or irritate her while he was at home. She would leave him alone for hours at a time, even overnight if I was away. She would then threaten to take him away and never see him again if he told me or anybody else. The therapist stated that this has made him feel powerless and dependent at a stage in his growth when he should be feeling powerful and self-reliant. My son is 16, yet he is autistic and has limited emotional awareness. So I've started teaching him situational awareness skills, such as paying attention to street names and reading addresses on buildings. It took a long time for me to feel better too. I began therapy about the same time as my son, and while I don't see my therapist as frequently as he does, being able to express my thoughts and feelings about all that has happened in our family has been beneficial. beneficial. The numbness has subsided, but it has been replaced by a white-hot ball of rage in the pit of my stomach whenever I think of my ex-wife and what she has caused our family to endure. Surprisingly, while I dislike being angry, it is much easier to deal with than being numb. My legal status has improved dramatically. I was awarded temporary full custody and child support, which I did not want but my lawyer insisted on, as well as the continuation of the order of protection for myself and my kid. My wife and her lawyer did not appear at the requested order hearing. The judge asked if we would allow supervised visits, but my son refused, so my lawyer advised me to bring him along. The judge asked if my son would talk with him alone, and he consented. The judge, stenographer, and a child welfare officer entered chambers with my son and spoke for about 10 minutes. Following their discussion, the judge granted the temporary orders and ordered therapy and a psychological evaluation for my kid. Fortunately, the therapist he is seeing is affiliated with or accredited to deal with the courts, so he does not need to see another therapist. My lawyer said this is a good thing since it means his therapist can propose custody, but it still scares the hell out of me that she could gain custody after everything she's put him through. I know very little about the affair part. According to my lawyers, he is still alive and in the hospital. I haven't heard from the police since my original interview, so there's nothing new to say there. Things were awkward with my ex-wife. I had not seen her since the day I was questioned. Granted, she has attempted to phone me several times, but I have not responded. And when she called from another number, I hung up right away. I have nothing to say to her, and I do not want to hear what she has to say to me. Her attorney wanted a preliminary hearing before our court-appointed mediation. She was served during the second week of January. She was there with her lawyer, and while this may sound petty, she looked dreadful. She was always a beautiful, athletic woman. I swear in our wedding photos she looks like a supermodel. But now, she has lost so much weight that it is alarming. She appears sick and weak. She didn't look at me. She sat with her face down throughout the most of the meeting. Long story short, everything they requested was ludicrous. They requested visitation during the divorce procedures and split custody thereafter. They asked us to remove the OPs. She intends to cohabitate until the divorce is finalized. I am not joking. After all this, she wants to stay in the same house. It was so offensive that my head throbbed during the conference, but it was all worthwhile for the big disclosure we made to her lawyer. Her lawyer inquired about how we should handle discovery for the division of assets, to which my lawyer responded with a confused expression. What division of assets? Read the prenup. The expression on her lawyer's face was priceless. She had not informed her lawyer about the prenup. My late uncle, the founding partner of the legal business I employ, created that prenup and even had a lawyer to review it for her before we married. My lawyer says it's beautiful because we never mixed monies. According to my uncle's instructions, the house we live in was given to me by him before we married. All of the utilities and insurance are in my name. All of the vehicles are registered in the owner's name, and we have never had to sign any debts for each other. We have a single shared savings account that is utilized for household expenses and an emergency reserve. It contains roughly $8,000, which she has already drained. There is now less than $300 in it. The prenup specifies that all marital assets and debt will be divided 50/50, and ownership of all intangible assets and personal debt will revert to the individual who incurred it. The adultery clause basically states that we agreed that if either partner is caught or admits to committing adultery, they will lose their right to receive spousal support. But the last thing her lawyer asked for was something that really upset me. He requested that we postpone the formal mediation for 6 months while my ex-wife enters an inpatient rehabilitation clinic for substance misuse. When he stated that, I couldn't believe my wife might have a substance use disorder. I spoke with my lawyer, who said we'd discuss it and come back to them with our choice. Before we departed, my ex-wife addressed me for the first time and requested me to read a letter she had written to me. My lawyer gave me the "this may be a snake, so be careful" look, and I debated with myself for a moment before deciding to accept it. When I went home, I read it and now I regret it. It began with all of the busted cheater platitudes. I love you, I love our family, I know I mistreated our son, and I hate myself for it. I want us to be together again. What was most alarming was her admission that she began abusing her prescription after a major surgery she underwent around 2 years ago. After a while, she began purchasing them from some of her co-workers, including her affair partner. He became her go-to guy, and when she ran out of money, she began sleeping with him to compensate. She explained that she kept this from me because she was terrified I would make her quit, and she couldn't feel right without them anymore. He was nothing more to her than a fix, and she despises herself for what she has done, both to herself and to us. Now, she says she sees how bad what she's done is and wants to make things better for our family, and she asks me to give her some time to prove she wants it.